Welcome to the class. Today, we are going to look at examples of complex clauses in order to analyze sentences on the basis of how sentences get processed and produced in human mind. As we know, in order to learn a new language like English, we need to understand how information functions in mind, how we process information and how they get analyzed in the sense of computation in our mind. Once we understand these processes, we pay attention to them. They have implications for our learning and they impact us in such a way that we start using them in our production, in our sentences, and thus our language becomes better. In other words, I would like to warn you as a footnote that the only way to understand complexities underlying sentences is to go through the analysis of sentences in terms of understanding its various constituents. There is no other way. We cannot memorize these things. We cannot ignore these things either. Hence this tedious process. Only the process of looking at requires your attention. And after looking at these things, the result is miraculous. It will make you confident, it will make you sound, and it will make your language impressive. So please look at how we analyze a complex clause. As we know, a sentence can also be a clause, and in such a situation we call it an independent clause. Thus, an independent sentence, a sentence with an independent status, is called a clause too. It's called an independent clause. A sentence has a subordinate clause as well. A sentence can have another sentence as its subordinate clause. And the dependence of that clause on some constituent of the main clause makes that clause a subordinate clause. And the sentence, the larger sentence, a complex one. That is a complex sentence. When a sentence is connected, when two sentences are connected with a comma, a connector or conjunctions like and, or, etc., in such a situation, we call a sentence a compound sentence. And when a sentence has another subordinate clause in it, then we call that sentence a complex sentence. There could be several types of subordinate clauses within a sentence. As long as it has a function in the same sentence, it makes the sentence a complex one. And because of its heaviness, because of its load of information, and its connection with another constituent in a larger sentence, we call it a complex sentence. Let's look at some of these examples which will help us illustrate the complexity underlying a sentence. So, as we see, what you learned from this slide is what I was describing, that when a sentence has an independent clause and one or more subordinate clauses, then it's called a complex sentence. Ordinarily, we often use as many or even more complex sentences than simple or compound sentences. So, this part simply tells you that the use of complex sentence or compound sentence, that is two sentences connected together, or a simple sentence, for the purpose of uses in the language, we have lot of freedom. But we do use complex sentences a lot when we speak or write. Let's take this short paragraph from Swami and Friends. Again, I would recommend you to pause here, stop for a moment, read the paragraph for yourself a couple of times first. Then when you move further, look at instances of complex sentences that are used in this paragraph, and we have given you a list of some of those sentences. So, what is this paragraph? Before you read this, I read it for you in a slower speed so that you also read along, and then when I stop, you read it one more time. Pause it and read it. After making his exit from Albert Mission School in that theatrical manner, on the day following the strike, Swaminathan became so consistently stubborn that a few days later his father took him to the board school and admitted him there. This is one sentence. At first, Swaminathan was rather uncertain of his happiness in the new school, but he excited the curiosity that all newcomers do and found himself, to his great satisfaction, the center of attraction in 2nd C. All his new classmates, remarkably new faces, often clustered around him to see him and hear him talk. He had not yet picked the few that he would have liked to call his chums. He still believed that his Albert Mission set was intact, though since the reopening in June, the set was not what it had been before. Sankar disappeared, and people said his father had been transferred. Somu was not promoted, and that meant he was automatically excluded from the group, the law being inexorable in that respect. The P was promoted, but he returned to the class exactly 3 months late, and he was quite full up with medical certificates, explanations, and exemptions. He was a man of 100 words now, and passed his old friends like a stranger. Only Rajam and money were still intact as far as Swaminathan was concerned. Mani saw him every day, but Rajam had not spoken to him since the day when his political doings became known. It's an excerpt from Swami and Friends, and you get to see lots of different types of sentences in this paragraph. All these instances are examples of complex sentences. After making his exit from Albert Mission School in that theatrical manner on the day following the strike, Swaminathan became so inconsistently stubborn that few days later his father took him to the board school and admitted him there. Look at this whole sentence. It has only one full stop, but if you identify clauses within this, you will find this as one. Swaminathan became consistently stubborn is another one. That a few days later his father took him to the board school and admitted him there. So you see lots of things in this, and if you need to identify the main clause in this, it is Swaminathan became so consistently stubborn, meaning Swaminathan is the subject of the sentence, became is the verb, and Swaminathan became what? It's a transitive verb, so stubborn. Consistently is an adverb to this verb. So stubborn. Now, I leave it for you to identify that a few days later his father took him to the board school and admitted him there. What kind of clause is this? What is the function of this clause? I will give you a clue. Only one noun is being modified by this clause. Look at the second sentence. But he excited the curiosity. He excited the, he is the subject, excited is the verb, the curiosity. That all newcomers do, and found himself to his great satisfaction the center of attraction in C. Look at this. Here it's connected with and, but this whole thing is a clause which is also modifying a noun. So find out the independent clause, that is the main clause, and see the function of this clause and its connection with the constituent in the independent clause. He had not yet picked the few that he would like to call his chums. Now, again, he is the subject of the sentence, had not yet picked is the verb. This is the verbal complex. Picked is a transitive verb, and the few is the object of that verb. Now again, that he would like to count, he would have liked to call his chums. See what this is again modifying something in the main clause and what it is modifying. Once you look at these things in the manner I am trying to do, you can also take a text, a short paragraph from a newspaper or any kind of paragraph from anywhere, a random sample, and you will find these kinds of clauses and sentences in that piece of writing. And I want you to do this exercise for yourself for identifying the main clause, the subordinate clause, the way in which a sentence is a complex sentence or a compound sentence, and above all, the function of those clauses in that sentence. That will give you confidence in constructing your own sentences, either for the purpose of speaking or for the purpose of writing. Let's move on and see. He still believed. Here is he, subject, and believed. Wow. This is a verb. This is a transitive verb. That his Albert mission set was intact, though since the reopening in June, the set. So this whole thing, what is the connection of this whole thing with this? And then what is the composition of this whole thing itself? That his Albert mission set was intact, though since the reopening in June, the set was not what it had been before. If you look at these things, this is the crux of learning, and pretty soon you will start constructing sentences like this and start speaking sentences like this. The important thing is to look at the missing connection, the computation, the way these sentences make sense in our mind. Again, look at this large sentence. Sankar disappeared and people said that his father had been transferred. Okay, Sankar disappeared. So what kind of a sentence is this? Look at this. This is the subject and this is the verb. Okay, and people said, this is again subject, this is the verb. That his father had been transferred. So that his father has been transferred, and people said, and Sankar disappeared. What's the connection of these phrases with each other? Somu was not promoted. Somu was not promoted. And that meant he was automatically excluded from the group, the law being inexorable in that respect. Semicolon. The P was promoted, but he returned to the class exactly 3 months late, and he was quite full up with medical certificates, explanations and exemptions. So it has several different kinds of sentences in it, and all put together makes one sentence. So it tells you about use of semicolon, use of clauses, that, finding the main clause, main verb, and its dependence over different clauses. Please take a look at this. Only Rajam and Mani were still intact as far as Swaminathan was concerned. So for Swaminathan, Rajam and Mani were intact. But Rajam had not spoken to him since the day when his political doings became known. So, here is the sentence again, and it's doing what I have just explained to you. After making his exit from Albert Mission School in that theatrical manner on the day following this strike, Swaminathan became so consistently stubborn that a few days later his father took him to the board school and admitted him there. So, Swaminathan became so consistently stubborn. This is the main clause. And this is the subordinate clause or embedded clause. That a few days later his father took him to the board school. This is one part. And admitted him there. So, when you look at it within the subordinate clause, you have a compound sentence. Just giving you clues for that. So what do we see here? One subordinate clause can be different forms, can have different forms, can be different from another, not only in length but also in its function. So, all subordinate clauses do not have same length and same functions. That's the purpose of this point. A subordinate clause can have a function of a noun as an object. A subordinate clause can be functioning as an adjective in modifying a noun, or a subordinate clause can be giving you an additional information being an adverbial clause. That is, a subordinate clause can have nominal function, adjectival function and adverbial function. It can be both like a complement, that is an object, and adjectival in terms of modification. But in the same sentence, when we have 2 or 3 subordinate clauses performing 2 or 3 different functions, we can have, within the same sentence, we can have all these possibilities available. He excited the curiosity that all newcomers do. So, independent clause is, he excited the curiosity, and that all newcomers do is the subordinate clause. Here the subordinate clause is working like an adjective, and it further qualifies the noun curiosity in the independent clause given above. So, this is the answer that I was asking you to find out before. So, he excited the curiosity, here is the noun, and that all newcomers do is the, so it has, this subordinate clause has adjectival function, and this modifies this noun curiosity in the independent clause. So, ordinarily speaking, there are 3 kinds of subordinate clauses as I have just described to you: noun clauses, adjective clauses and adverbial clauses. Meaning, a clause which has nominal function, we can simply say functions as a noun clause, adjectival clause or adverbial clause. So, there can be at least 3 different kinds of noun clauses depending on their function. So, subordinate noun clauses working as. So, now we are going to define the functions of a nominal clause. So a subordinate clause as a noun clause can be the subject can be the subject of the sentence also. So look at this. It was believed last year by everyone that the pandemic would disappear. Okay, this is working as a subject of the verb was. So if you replace this thing, that the pandemic would disappear was believed last year by everyone. This is the sentence. So this whole thing, that the pandemic would disappear, if it comes here, then it becomes the subject of this passive sentence. So a whole clause can be, it has a nominal function and can be the subject of this sentence. So in order to do that, as you already know, or you know, that an entire subordinate clause in its nominal function can be the object of a verb as well. So we identify number of clauses first. We understand their nature, that is if they are adjectival, adverbial or nominal, and then we understand their function, namely whether it qualifies then it as an adjective clause, or it's a subordinate clause as a noun one, or it's an object to something, or it has adverbial function. So it's important for you to take a look at it peacefully, carefully and understand it precisely. Three things are important. Trying to in clause analysis, in identifying a clause, understanding the nature of the clause and understanding the function of the clause. So in order to identify, by three things I meant, to identify we need to know three things. Whenever we want to identify, we need to know nature and function. Nature meaning nominal, adjectival or adverbial. Functions, is it qualifying, is it modifying, is it being a subject, is it being an object, or is it just giving some additional information. If you look at these things carefully, then you get a much clearer idea about what is happening in a complex sentence. So here look at how an example shows that it's a subordinate clause is working as an object to a verb in the main clause. He still believed that his Albert Mission School was intact. So this whole sentence is the object of the verb believe, which is a transitive verb. A subordinate clause can also give additional information about the noun in the independent sentence or about the verb also. In such a situation, it is called, it has adverbial function. So adverbial function is different from the function of a noun, function as an object of a verb. So look at this. So here is a different paragraph, different example. Rabindranath Tagore, who was a Nobel laureate, was not only a great writer but also a great manager. He ran a school, a university, a printing press and a journal nearly all his life, which is a life worth talking about. The given paragraph has two sentences. Sentence 1 has three clauses. Rabindranath Tagore was not only a great writer. One clause, he was also a Nobel laureate. Third, was also a great manager. 2 is not adjectival clause. It is not an adjectival clause. It is a subordinate noun clause in apposition. In the sense that it doesn't qualify the preceding noun. It provides only additional information about the main noun. So, what is the meaning of that? It means Rabindranath Tagore, who is a Nobel laureate, was not only a writer. So, here, who was a Nobel laureate? This part is giving an additional information about this noun. Such a clause is also called relative clause, but it only gives an additional information. So taking it away from that, so in this apposition information, it has adjectival information. That is, a relative clause modifies a noun even though it is giving additional information. It is kind of modification, additional information in the form of modification. So, a sentence is being used as modifier. A clause, a subordinate clause is being used as a modifier is the point here. So, in the previous paragraph, you would see he still believed main clause, subordinate clause, that his Albert Mission School was intact. So, look at this. In this whole sentence, though since the reopening in June, the set was not what it had been before. What it had been before is a subordinate noun clause in apposition to the noun set. So, it's a what it had been before. What it had been before from here is just a modifier clause. So, take this paragraph as test set for yourself. You can find different kinds of subordinate noun clause here in this paragraph and you can compare your answers in the section. I am going to read this for you slow. You pause again, read and then find the clauses in it. Rajan realized at this point that the starting of a cricket team was the most complicated problem on earth. He had simply expected to gather a dozen fellows on the maiden next to his compound and play and challenge the world. But there were endless troubles starting with a name that must be unique, government, taxes and so on. Government did not seem to know where it ought to infer and where not. He had a momentary sympathy for Gandhi. No wonder he was dead against the government. So it just gives you some idea about different types of clauses. It has examples of different types of clauses and identifying them will help you take it further. In this sentence, Rajan realized at this point, it's a main independent clause, the government did not seem to know. Main clause, and that starting of a cricket team was the most complicated problem on the earth. Subordinate clause, where it ought to infer and where not. Another example of subordinate clause. So, to conclude this part, what we know is we need to identify clauses, to analyze them, in terms of its nature and function, and when we pay proper attention to them by doing several exercises of the types that we have suggested and recommended and demonstrated to you, you will get a fairly good implications of these things in your speech and writing. Looking forward to hearing from you. Until next time.